It's now time to introduce our special guest. We're thrilled to have with us tonight Sailesh Rao, PhD. Dr. Sailesh Rao is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated towards healing the Earth's climate. A systems specialist with a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University, Dr. Rao worked on the internet communications infrastructure for 20 years after graduation. In 2006, he switched careers and became deeply immersed full-time in the environmental crises affecting humanity. Dr. Rao is the author of the 2011 book, Carbon Dharma, The Occupation of Butterflies, and the 2016 book, Carbon Yoga, The Vegan Metamorphosis. He is an executive producer of the trilogy of documentaries, They Don't Want You to See, The Human Experiment, 2013, Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, which I know a lot of you have seen, 2014, and also What the Health, 2017, which explore the systemic causes of human and environmental ill health. He is also an executive producer of the new groundbreaking documentary, A Prayer for Compassion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sailesh Rao.
Thank you so much for the great introduction, and thank you for your hospitality. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I want to talk to you today about this topic, which is it's very topical at the moment, how not to go extinct. But I'm cheating a bit because I've given you the answer in the title itself. If you look closely, I show a vegan world by 2026. That's the way to get to a solution for our problems. How many of you here would like to see a vegan world by 2026? Not all, okay. So how many of you are vegan? Okay, not all. It's interesting. So how many of you would deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? So by definition, all of you are vegan in your hearts. But our minds are not in alignment with our hearts. So this journey of adopting a vegan lifestyle is about coming into alignment with our hearts. So, and we are each in our own path on this journey, because we are each in different places on this journey. So you all have your own individual journey. And the best we can do is to help you when you seek help, okay? So how many of you believe that we can get to a vegan world by 2026? Just 2 or 3. So this is my job for this year, is to make you believe. Okay? So I'm going to talk to you about exponential change. Professor Albert Bartlett of the University of Colorado said this. He said, the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. All changes in human society happen through exponential processes. Pretty much all changes. But at any given point in time, we extrapolate linearly. We don't think exponentially. We think the same thing that's happening now will continue happening forever. And this is one of our greatest shortcomings. I'm also going to be talking about transformations and not change. Because change is inevitable. Change is going to happen to us whether we like it or not. Because nature is going to force change on us. But transformation is intentional. Transformation is something that we choose to do. So I'm going to talk to you about transformations that we have done and transformations that we need to do going forward. So I'm going to organize this in 4 subtopics. Firstly, I'm going to talk about how to go extinct. before we talk about how not to go extinct, let's look at how to go extinct. And then we'll talk about exponential transformations, and then how we transform our stories and how we transform our games. Because you see, as human beings, we tell stories and we play games in order to coordinate our actions among billions of us together. That's who we are. We are really good at coordinating our actions as a species. And we do that through stories and games. So let's talk about how to go extinct first. It's actually very simple. Continue doing what we are doing, and we are guaranteed to go extinct. Okay? It's like a dead certainty. We're going to go extinct if we keep doing what we are doing. Firstly, mass extinction. In fact, there was an article a couple of days ago in Truth Out saying, we keep talking about the 6th great mass extinction. It really isn't the 6th great mass extinction. It's the 1st great mass extermination. Extinction is something that happens because of other circumstances. This is an extermination that we are doing. This is deliberate killing that's happening. So if you look at the biomass of wild animals from 10,000 years ago, it was about 200 million metric tons. So that's shown on the left here. And on top of that, you see the biomass of human beings was a tiny little blip 10,000 years ago. Fast forward to 1970, the biomass, the weight of all the wild animals on Earth put together, had decreased by 60% from pristine levels. Okay? So they are down by 60%. And the weight of all human beings put together was equal to the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago, about 200 million tons. And on top of that, we were raising animals for food and for clothing and other purposes. And they were double our weight, but they were eating 3 times as much food as we eat. The reason is that these are all young animals. They're an unnatural mix of young animals, and they're eating much more than their weight alone would indicate. This is why they are eating 3 times as much food as we eat, even though they're only double our weight. But as far as the planet is concerned, they're presenting a profile of a biomass that's 3 times our weight. Okay? So that was 1970. Then between 1970 and 2010, the weight of wild animals decreased by 52%. And it is an exponential process. It's an exponential process of decline. And our weight doubled because our population roughly doubled between 1970 and 2010. And the weight of all the animals we are raising for food was equivalent to a biomass that's 9 times the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. So this was 2010. And this result the calculation on the weight of wild animals came out in 2014. And at that point, I made a calculation. If it is an exponential process, how many more years can we continue doing this before we wipe them all off the face of the earth? And I came up with the answer, 2026 is year 0. That's the year when we are on track to wipe out all the wild animals off the face of the earth. I was shocked. I thought, why isn't anybody doing something about this? Then I thought, maybe my exponential model is not correct, so let me wait and see what happens. I'll wait for the next report. That next report came out in 2016, and it said that between 1970 and 2012, 58% of all wild animals died off. So we were losing roughly 3% per year. And at that rate, even a linear extrapolation will take us to 100% by 2026. You don't even need an exponential extrapolation. So clearly, we are on track to wipe out all the wild animals, and you'll see, the reason why the Amazon is burning, it's killing all the wild animals too. And we go on, the wild animals have no place to hide from us. If you want to kill them, we kill them. They cannot even hide in the ocean, because now we use GPS technology to find the last remaining fish and catch them and kill them. So this is a mass extermination process that's happening. Okay? And it's an exponential process. Now, right after I made the right after I confirmed my calculations in 2016, I was reading a story to my granddaughter in bed, and at the end of that story, she asked me, "Grandpa, who were the first human beings?" And I have promised her that I will never ever lie to her. So I tried to explain to her the theory of evolution. So I said, imagine that you're standing on the street and you're holding your mom by your hand, and you get your mom to get her mom to come and stand by her side, and so on. So you create a long line of mothers on this side of the street. And on the other side of the street, you ask a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mother and her grandmother, and so on. So you create a long line of chimpanzee mothers. By the time these two lines go from Phoenix to Tucson, they would merge. There'll be only one single line, because both lines are going to say, "That's my mother too." Immediately she sat up in bed and she said, "What? Are you telling me that animals are my family?" And I said, "Yeah, now that you put it that way, yes, they are your family." And she said, "Why are people eating my family?" "Grandpa, make them stop." And she started bawling. She was naming names. She was telling me, "So-and-so is eating my family, so-and-so is eating my family." And she was bawling her eyes out. And I told her, "Kimaya, please stop. This is exactly what I've been trying to do for the last few years. In fact, this is my job, to make them stop." She said, "This is your job? You know you haven't done your job? When will you do your job?" She said, "Tell me when you will do your job." And I said, "Well, we have to do it by 2026, otherwise we are all in big trouble." She said, "Promise?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll promise you." She said, "Will you give me a pinky promise?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "You can never ever break a pinky promise." And then she went to sleep. Of course, the next day she went and told her mom, "My grandpa promised me that the world will be vegan by 2026. And her mom said, "What? What did you make grandpa promise? Do you know how hard it is to get people to change?" So she comes to me that evening and she says, "Grandpa, I hear you have a tough job. So you don't have to do it by the time I'm 16 years old. You can do it by the time I'm 17 years old." So she gave me an extra year. But I told her, "No, I want to make it by the time you're 16 years old. Let's make it the Vegan World 2026 project." And really, how hard can it really be? If our house is on fire and we tell the fellow residents in our house, "Please stop throwing gasoline on the fire," is that not a reasonable request? If we are on track to wipe out all the wild animals of the face of the earth, is it not reasonable to ask people to stop killing animals unnecessarily? Especially when this is who we really are. And we are asking them to do this within the next 7 years. That's plenty of time, right? So I think it's a very reasonable goal for us to try and get to a vegan world by 2026. Because once we stop pouring gasoline on the fire, then we have to put out the fire too. We have to put out the fire, and then we have to reconstruct what is burnt. So we have a lot of work to do beyond going vegan. So that's one of the first reasons. Now, the reason why this is happening is because we have equated, in our game, we have equated death with money. It's only when animals are dead do we make money off of them. There is no use to us. An animal that's alive does not have much value to us. The second exponential process that's happening now, that's going to force a change on us, is the healthcare crisis. This is because we are playing a game. Money is a game. So we are playing a game in which when people get diseases, we make money off of them. So disease is money. So 14 of the 15 leading causes of death in Western societies can be mitigated and even reversed with a whole foods plant-based diet. But hardly anybody even talks about it. The doctors don't tell you this. Why? Because there's a lot of money being made in this. And we know that if we continue making people sick and then fixing them with pharmaceuticals and surgical procedures, if we continue doing that, then by 2026, Medicare is on track to become bankrupt. We are heading for this end game in this, okay? We cannot continue doing this. Finally, the climate emergency is upon us. Again, the way climate change is framed in mainstream media and in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and by all governments, is to treat destruction as a source of money. So when you destroy the planet and you reconstruct, you're going to make money off of that. So if you look at the projections of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, so they're projecting like 4 different possibilities for the future. So RCP 8.5, 6.0, 4.5, 2.5. So RCP is the representative concentrated pathways. And 8.5 means that in the year 2100, human-caused climate change is like adding 8.5 watts per square meter of heating on the Earth's surface for every square meter. Right now, we are heating the Earth by about 1.6 watts per square meter. So it's about 5 times increase by 2100. So that's literally like business as usual. Doing nothing will take us there. Okay? The second scenario that they studied is RCP 6.0, which is 6 watts per square meter. It's still heating up the Earth more than what we're heating up today, almost 4 times as much. 6 watts per square meter. To me, that's the equivalent of a bypass surgery for the planet. Because the planet has diseases. The planet has heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, all kinds of diseases now, right? So it's like doing a bypass surgery for the planet to overcome the heart disease. And the reason we look at it this way is because we make money off of it. So it's going to cost $100 trillion to do this bypass surgery. Second is RCP 4.5, which is 4.5 watts per square meter in 2100. It's still almost 3 times as much heating as we are doing today. And that, to me, is the equivalent of bypass surgery plus chemotherapy for the planet. So a lot more money can be made. And the final scenario that they studied was RCP 2.5, which is the equivalent of bypass surgery, chemotherapy, and kidney transplant for the planet. Lots of money can be made. So in all of the scenarios that they studied, we are heating up the Earth more than we are heating it up today. And you can already see that we cannot heat up the Earth more than we are heating it up today. You can already see that. So I'm suggesting that we have to look at this other alternative, I call it RCP 1.0, in which we are heating it up less than we are heating it up today by the year 2100, just 1 watt per square meter. And that is the equivalent of going on a whole food plant-based diet for the planet. It's a lifestyle change for the planet. That's the one scenario that they do not talk about in the IPCC. But the IPCC also said a few months ago that there is a do not cross line beyond which the Earth will take over. So if you go beyond this line of about 450 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, the Earth will start pumping its own methane from the Arctic, and by the time, you cannot control it anymore. So there is a do not cross line, and in fact, the only thing that can meet that would prevent us from going over the do not cross line is a whole food plant-based diet change. Okay? So we are stuck. And we need to do this by 2030 at least. That's from what they're saying. But I think it's going to be even sooner than that. So this is why I say Vegan World 2026 is a very reasonable target for us. Now let's talk about exponential transformations. See, just like the bad things are happening as an exponential process, the good things are also exponential processes. And these are transformations because these are voluntary changes that human beings did, in the past. I'll show you some past examples. First example is what happened in India in 1920, where Gandhi started the Khadi movement. So you can see his photograph in 1914. He was a lawyer. So he was dressed in a suit and a tie. And by 1920, you can see he has changed his dress, because he was trying to convince the people of India to change their clothes from British clothes to khadi clothes made by Indians in India. And at first people laughed at him. They said, you're taking on the mightiest empire the world has ever seen by changing your clothes? How are you going to do this? How are you going to get India independence from the British rule with this? But he was persistent. You can see what he wrote in 1926 in the magazine, Navjivan magazine. He said, I consider it my duty to induce people by every honest means to wear khadi. So this was not a passive man wearing khadi and saying, look at me and follow my example whenever you feel like it. He was going after people and telling them, please change your clothes and wear khadi. So by 1930, everyone in India was wearing khadi clothes. It was one of the most successful grassroots movements that he started. And the textile mills in Manchester went bankrupt. And the British government was on its knees begging to negotiate with him. Until then, they were ignoring him. Okay? But once it hit their pocketbooks and whole industry started collapsing, they woke up and they said, oh, this is serious. So we have to negotiate with them. So it was a very successful battle that he fought. Okay? He won the battle, but he lost the war. This is why I am not wearing khadi. I'm still wearing Western clothes. Okay? So the second example I want to talk to you about is the moon landing. So in 1962, when President Kennedy made that speech at Rice University, a lot of people scoffed at him. They said, we can't even get someone up there and bring him back down, and you're talking about sending them all the way to the moon and back? It's a pipe dream. And he even set a date. He said, by the end of this decade, we're going to have a man on the moon. But that inspired Americans. That inspired young people. And they said, we want to help you make that happen. And so, like any engineer, it's all about how. Engineering is about how do you do something. And so they broke it up into pieces, and they addressed each part of it and solved it. So by 1969, man was on the moon. That was an exponential transformation that happened in technology. The next one, I was involved in this, so I know intimately what happened here. In 1995, when I was working on the internet, not many people knew what it was. Not many people were using it. And in fact, there was an article in Newsweek saying, the internet is going nowhere. Who's going to buy things on the internet? Who's going to read stuff off the internet? It's just pipe dream. It's going nowhere. And in fact, he was complaining about the slow connections that they were having. So too many connections, try again later. These are the kinds of messages that we were getting when we searched on the internet in 1995. So the title of the article at that time was The Internet? Bah. Right? And so we worked on standardizing the internet and making it faster and more robust. So we converted it from analog connections to digital connections, and we made it run 10 times faster and much more robust. And then suddenly it was no longer too many connections. It was, you click on something, it showed up. And people loved the experience. And by 2003, we were selling 150 million units a year. The internet was on every motherboard that Intel was shipping. And the Google guys had put their search engine out, and everything was great. And I overheard someone say, I don't think I can live without the internet. So that's how fast things changed. The next example is gay marriage. In 2005, the governor of California vetoed gay marriage. And people thought it's crazy. How can you let men get married to men and women get married to women? This is not the way things are done. And it was so fast that exponential transformation in cultural sensibilities. Within 10 years, it was normal to get married throughout the United States. So you can see every time people said this cannot be done, it happened. Because enough people believed in it and they made it happen. So next is the vegan movement. See, I gave this presentation at the American Geophysical Union's fall meeting in 2015. And in this presentation, we analyzed what would happen if the whole world goes vegan. So we showed that if the whole world goes vegan, we release about 10 billion acres of land back to nature for reforestation. And if you just bring back the original forest that used to be there in 1800, and that was only on 4 of the 10 billion acres of land used to be forests in 1800, because the other 6 billion acres were deforested before 1800, so we don't have much record of that. So on that 40% of that land, if you just bring back the original forest, you can sequester more carbon, or you can store more carbon than we have added to the atmosphere since 1750. So we could store 265 gigatons of carbon when we have poured 240 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, or we have added 240 gigatons of carbon to the atmosphere since 1750. So we can literally reverse climate change. So that was the talk, and that was the presentation we made at the AGU, which is the largest gathering of climate scientists in the world. So over 100 climate scientists came to talk to me, and they all said, yeah, you're right, but this will never happen. And I said at that point, I've heard this before. So which means it is going to happen in the next 10 years. Okay? And sure enough, it is happening. See, there has been an exponential growth in the vegan movement. So by the year 2016, the search for the term vegan exceeded the search for the term Coca-Cola. Okay? And you must have heard recently that all fast food organizations are trying to have a vegan option. Burger King has the Impossible Burger, and Wendy's is talking about vegan meat options. This is not because Wendy's wants to promote veganism. It's because if they don't have a vegan option, they're going bankrupt. Because you see, in any group, it's the vegan who decides where the group goes to eat. So they're stuck. They're stuck. They have to offer a plant-based option, a decent vegan option. Otherwise, they're going to go bankrupt. They know that. And that's why it's happening. Okay? And Forbes reported that between 2014 and 2017, the number of people in the US who say they are vegan increased by a factor of 7. In just 3 years, it increased by a factor of 7. If we just maintain that rate of growth, then by 2020, it will be another factor of 7. By 2023, it will be a factor of 49. And by 2026, it will be a factor of 343. Which means that if even 0.3% of the people were vegan in 2017, 100% will be vegan by 2026. If we just maintain that rate of growth. So, this is why I ask you, please believe that a vegan world is possible by 2026. Because it's only when you believe it that you work for it. And when you work for it, we'll get it done. So it's important for us to first believe. So I consider the vegan movement to be the exact equivalent of the Khadi movement of the 20th century. This is the Khadi movement of the 21st century. So to paraphrase Gandhi, I say, I consider it my duty to induce people by every honest means to go vegan. Okay? But to get to a vegan world, we also have to transform our stories. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine that after Michelangelo finished sculpting David, imagine that he spent all his time worrying about the pieces of marble on the floor, the mess that he has created with the marble chips that are on the floor, because he used a hammer and a chisel, and cut a huge block of marble into this David. And imagine if he tries to clean up that mess using a hammer and a chisel. How successful would he be? He would miss the David that he has sculpted if he did that. And he would miss the fact that you need a bucket and a shovel to clean up. You cannot do it with a hammer and a chisel. This is exactly what we are doing today. We are ignoring the David that we have created, and we are focusing on the mess, and we are trying to clean up the mess with the same old tools. So we need to change our tools too. I got into this because I was in this forest in the Western Ghats of India in 2009. And you can see how beautiful this forest is. Everything was perfect. I had the sense of perfection in that forest. And it was a forest, a sanctuary, created by a couple from New Jersey. So they went to India and created this sanctuary. And I said, Pamela, how did you do this? This is amazing. She said, we did nothing. We just came here, we bought a coffee plantation, and we tore down the fences and gave it back to the animals. And the animals did everything. They came and dropped their seeds, and new trees were born, and pretty soon the coffee farm was completely overrun with the native forest. I said, that's it? That's all you had to do? She said, no, well, one other thing we had to do, we had to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside. And at that point, I felt like I don't even belong in my own birthplace because I was born in this forest. So something is wrong. Something is wrong with the story we are telling ourselves. Because you see, every animal lives according to the vitality code. Receive all that you need, give all that you can, and become all that you are. That's the vitality code. And every animal routinely gives more than it receives. Now, this is why animals just live and the ecosystem comes back and flourishes. So we just live and the ecosystem dies. So something is wrong, right? Something is wrong with our stories. This is a story of separation. See, we ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge and we got kicked out of Eden, so we don't belong in Eden anymore. We are separated from Eden. That's the story we've been telling ourselves, that we don't really belong in nature. So I was very depressed about this. And this, story of Adam and Eve is pretty common knowledge. Anyone I ask, they know the story of Adam and Eve. And then a year later, my granddaughter was born. She was born in Phoenix, and we were living in the Bay Area at that time. And I realized that my wife was no longer home. She just disappears. She would go to Phoenix and show up for a day and go back for a month again. So finally, she told me, there is something about this baby. You need to go see her. Something magical about her. So I went to see her when she was a month old. I held her in my arms, and I had the exact same feeling of perfection that I had at the sanctuary. So this little girl was telling me, I belong exactly as I am. So you all must belong exactly as you are. So go figure out that story where we do belong exactly as we are. So I started doing my research, and I found out that there is a story equivalent of the Adam and Eve story. There is a story like that in the Vedic literature. And it's actually much more nuanced. And it helped me understand the story in the Bible. So I'll tell you the story. So it's called the wishing tree story. The role of Adam and Eve is played by children in this story. The role of the serpent is played by a rich uncle. And the story begins with children playing with sticks and stones and rag dolls on the floor of their hut in the middle of the forest. And their uncle comes to visit them. And the uncle says, why are you playing with these sticks and stones when the wishing tree is right outside your hut? So go out under the tree and wish for anything you want, and it will give it to you. Then you can be playing with real toys instead of these trifles. The children don't believe him. How can there be a wishing tree? That's not how the universe is built. So they wait until the uncle leaves, and then they rush to the tree and they start wishing. They wish for sweets, and they get them. And they gorge on the sweets, and they get stomachache. They wish for toys, and they get them. And they play with the toys, and they get bored. Then they wish for fancier toys, and that leads to greater boredom. So there was something about this tree that they did not understand. It grants you what you wish for, and along with it comes the exact opposite. Because that's how the universe is built, of dualities. Nothing comes separate by itself. The children didn't know that. All they knew is that they couldn't stop wishing under the tree, and the more they wished, the more miserable they were. Then they get to be young men and women. And now they're wishing for what young men and women wish for. The 4 main fruits of the tree were sex, fame, money, and power. And with each comes its opposite, and the result was more misery and suffering for the young men and women. Then they get to be old men and women. And they congregate under the tree in 3 different groups. The first group says, we were so happy when we didn't know about this tree. It has all been a hoax and a farce. And the story says they were fools, but they understood nothing about this tree. The second group says, we must have been wishing for all the wrong things. If we could go back and wish for different things, I'm sure we'd have been a lot happier. And they were bigger fools, but they understood less than nothing about this tree. And the third group was the most foolish of the lot, for they come under the tree and they say, we are so miserable, we wish we were dead. And the tree grants them the wish. And they're immediately reborn underneath the same tree, because the tree always grants wishes in dualities. So the story doesn't stop there. Then it talks about a lame child who was watching all this from inside the window of the hut. He also wanted to go out and wish for a good leg so he could walk. But there was such a crowd of people under the tree wishing, they pushed him away and he couldn't get through. He wasn't strong enough. So he stood there and he watched, and he saw how the tree was making everybody miserable. The people who were wishing were miserable, people who were trying to get to the tree were miserable, all the animals were suffering because of all the wishing. And then he had a brilliant flash of insight. He understood the tree. And with that understanding, he began to feel a well of compassion come from within him for all the suffering under the tree. And he lost the desire to wish. He became detached from the tree. And with that combination of compassion and detachment, he was the happiest of the lot. So that's where the story ends. And then we have these Upanishads where they teach you what they taught you in the Vedas, right? So in one of the Upanishads, they tell you that wishing child and the watching child are inside each one of us. That's our duality. And the purpose of meditation is to get in touch with our watching child and to observe our own wishing child and to be compassionate to our own wishing child. But it also makes it seem like if you want to be happy in the universe, you need to step away and observe and not do anything, not act. So that question comes up in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the sacred text of the Hindus. Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between God and man is asking God, why should I wish under this tree? Why are you making me do this? You are God, so you take care of the problem. And God says, how do you think I take care of the problem? Through you. So you have to wish under the tree. And then he taught him how to wish. He said, the people were miserable wishing under the tree because they were wishing for themselves. If you go under the tree and you wish for the benefit of everyone else, and you say, I don't want anything from this tree for myself, then you will be perfectly happy wishing under the tree, and everyone will be happy because of your wishing. See, selflessness is actually enlightened self-interest. So as a species, we are the only species that knows about this tree. This is our knowledge tree, our wishing tree. And as a species, we should be wishing for the benefit of every other species using this tree, not for ourselves. So that is the transformation that's happening now. That is the vegan transformation. Now this story helped me understand the story in the Bible, because in the Bible you got kicked out of Eden because they ate the apple themselves. If you had used the apple for the benefit of every other species, you would still be there, right? But you see, everything in nature has a role. Every species has a role. Even though a species looks like it may be doing something destructive, if you look closely, you will see that it is doing something constructive. And we have no choice but to live like this in nature. If you look at an elephant breaking a branch of a tree, eating the leaves, throwing the branch away, it looks like the elephant is being destructive in the forest. But if you look closely, you will see that wherever the elephant broke the branches of the trees, that's where the sunlight streams down and nourishes the underbrush. So without the elephant, there will be no sunlight for the underbrush, and the underbrush would die. So the elephant has no choice. Everything that the elephant does help the ecosystem. This is why they just live and the forest comes back. So you say, why is it that we are an exception to this rule? So no, we cannot be an exception to this rule. We do have to have a role. So our hypothesis is that the role for human beings is to be the climate regulator of the planet, the thermostat species of the planet. And I'll show you that we have been playing this role unconsciously. And now we have to play this role consciously. If you look at the past, the temperature of the Earth over the past 700,000 years, in fact, for the past 3 million years, it's been like this. You would see the Earth going into an ice age and coming out of an ice age, going into an ice age, coming out of an ice age. It's done that like over 100 times. And most of the time, it's in an ice age. The temperature in an ice age is about 15 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than it is in an interglacial period between ice ages. And we only stay in the interglacial period for 10,000 years or so, and then we go back to an ice age for 90,000 years. So that's what's been happening. And it's during this time that we were born as a species. And we came out of Africa about 50,000 years ago. So that's in the previous ice age. That's when we spread out from Africa. And you'll see something remarkable happening in the current interglacial period. If you look closely, the current interglacial period matches what was happening about 3 interglacial periods ago. So it's pretty parallel, okay? So it was going through the same transition, and then the temperature stayed constant instead of going down. And if you look closely, you'll see the human effect. So if you look at the methane in the atmosphere and the CO2 in the atmosphere, it was matching what was happening 3 interglacial periods ago, and then you see it taking off around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. That's because we started cutting down forests and raising animals for food. Raising animals. So that was the cause of the methane, and the CO2 is from cutting down forests. So by cutting down forests and raising animals, we started keeping the temperature constant. If you look at the temperature, you'll see that the temperature has stayed constant for 10,000 years, and it would have gone back to another ice age about 6,000 years ago if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't been deforesting. So then over the last 200 years, we discovered fossil fuels, and we started digging them up and burning them. And so the last 200 years, we've increased the temperature by another 1 degree Celsius. Now we have a choice. We can continue burning forests, continue destroying everything, and continue burning every fossil fuel that we have available to us, and raise the temperature by about 6 degrees Celsius so that everyone dies off, and then the Earth will go back to another ice age again. So that's what he's projecting now. This is from Bill Rudiman's book, by the way. Or we can all go vegan, bring back the forests that we cut, and that will sequester, or that will store all the excess carbon in the atmosphere, and all the carbon that we have pumped up by burning fossil fuels will still be up in the atmosphere, and that will prevent the Earth from ever going back to another ice age. So we can actually start regulating the temperature. consciously. So that's the choice we have right now. I think I'm going with option B. What do you think? And we have to do this by going vegan first. All of the discussion about climate change has been about fossil fuels only. Fossil fuels. Hardly anyone talks about animal agriculture and food. If tomorrow I eliminate all the fossil fuel use and replace coal-fired power plants with solar energy, we will start heating up the earth at double the rate that we're heating it up now. Because if you look at the components of our greenhouse gas emissions, so we have CO2, which is adding about 1.6 watts per square meter of heating of the earth. We have methane and other greenhouse gases, which is also adding another 1.6 watts per square meter of heating on the earth. And then we have aerosols, which cool the earth by about another 1.5 watts per square meter. So the net heating is about 1.6 watts per square meter. So the aerosols are cooling, and the aerosols are they go up in the atmosphere when we burn coal mainly. So it's when you burn coal, you're creating this cooling effect. So if you stop burning coal, the aerosols will disappear in a few days, because they only stay up in the atmosphere for a few days. Whereas the CO2 will still be up there. Okay? The CO2 will still be up there, the methane will still be up there because we're still eating animals. So we are going to be heating it up by 3.2 watts per square meter. So we'll double our heating. But if we go vegan first, you'll still have the aerosol because the coal is still being burnt. The methane will disappear within 12 years. And when the forests come back, they start storing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you will start decreasing the CO2 effect. So you'll have a soft landing only if we get to a vegan world first. So forget what they're telling you in Project Drawdown. Let's do this first, okay? And to do this, we have to transform our game. Because I showed you the game that we are playing with money, in which death equals money, destruction equals money, and diseases equals money. That is the main reason why we are having all these problems. See, Buckminster Fuller said that. He said, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will change the way they think. So a tool, to me, is a game. These days, it's an app on your phone. That's a tool. So what is this new game that we need to play? First of all, let's look at the old game and how that is going exponentially bad. Okay? Facebook announced in June that in collaboration with 100 other corporations, each of whom are putting $10 million into the Libra Association, they're going to create a new currency called Libra that will allow any Facebook member to buy anything from anywhere in the world. It's a cryptocurrency that unites all nations together under Facebook's umbrella. Now, this is a disaster. It will exponentially increase the destruction of the planet. And it will happen. It will happen because if you look at the voting stockholders of all these major corporations, you will see the same 4 financial holding companies. So whether it's big banks, big oil, big defense, big media, all of them have the same 4 financial holding companies: Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and Fidelity. And these are holding companies, they are private companies, so they don't have to disclose who their shareholders are. So they are controlling everything that's happening here. Okay? So if Facebook and 100 corporations want to do something, it means it has the approval of these guys, so which is going to happen. And the game itself is causing the destruction of the planet. See, the fractional reserve money game, this is how money is created in the current system. So if you put a $100 deposit in a bank, from that $100, the bank is able to loan out $90 and they only keep $10. And when that $90 comes back into the bank, they only keep $9 and they loan out $81. So if you look at the loans from the $100 deposit, you can get about $900 worth of loans. This is with a 10% fractional reserve. For small banks, it's a 3% fractional reserve, which means from $100 you can get about $3,000 worth of loans. So this is the basic transaction that human beings are doing in the game. And that basic transaction is as a lender and a borrower. And when you have a lender-borrower relationship, it's a very antagonistic relationship. Because if the borrower does not return the money back, the lender is going to come and take his collateral away. So it's a dominance relationship. So we start off, our fundamental relationship is a dominance relationship, so which is why we have all of these oppressions in the current system. So how do you earn money in the game? You can beg if you don't have money. You can beg for money. You can borrow from someone who has money. Or you can become a slave to someone who has money. Or you make enough money and start lending it out to make money. Those are the only 4 ways that you can earn money in the game. And this game fundamentally discourages natural abundance. So if this is a demand-supply curve, so for a given demand, if the supply increases, the price plummets. So I've seen examples in India, like 3 years ago when I went to India, a lot of farmers were committing suicide because they grew too many potatoes. Because they had a surplus of potatoes. Potatoes were just coming out of the ground like crazy. And they were killing themselves. Because the price of potatoes plummeted and they could not return the loan that they had borrowed from the bank. So here is a game in which we do not want abundance. And we promote an artificial scarcity in the game. So as far as food is concerned, we extract 9 billion tons of food from the planet, even though we only eat about 1.5 billion tons of food for all 7.8 billion human beings. Okay? So we take the 9 billion tons and we feed the majority of it, 7.27 billion tons, to our animals. And our animals produce 0.19 billion tons of food. So that is the scarce resource now. And then we fight over that. So from a natural abundance, we have to create an artificial scarcity, otherwise the whole system collapses. So as it is, more than 80% of the food we eat is already plant-based. Less than 20% is animal-based. So we just have to replace that and get to a game where we promote abundance and we are able to tolerate abundance. In fact, we should be enjoying abundance, right? So this game promotes marketing lies. So they keep telling us protein, meat, so it makes us think that meat is the only source of protein. And then it blows our mind when we discover that broccoli stalks actually have more protein than beef for the same number of calories. The same with milk and calcium. Milk and calcium. We think that milk is the only source of calcium. Then you discover that chia seeds have 6 times as much calcium as milk. So it blows our mind. And the same way they have been promoting climate change and fossil fuels. Climate change and fossil fuels. And it blows our mind when we discover that actually animal agriculture causes more emissions than fossil fuels. The game promotes perverse subsidies. So even though the demand for animal foods has been declining in the US, the supply has been increasing. And the USDA is buying the surplus and storing it in warehouses and dumping it after a year. You can see how much they have stored in relation to the US Capitol building on the right-hand side there. So we are storing about 4 billion pounds of cheese and processed meat. The game promotes death, disease, and destruction. So these are the 3 movies we made. The documentaries Human experiments showed how many chemical toxins we are pouring out into the environment. Unregulated, completely unregulated. And these toxins then get concentrated in animal foods. So then they persuade us to eat more animal foods as we go up in the economic ladder. Because it's only when you go up in the economic ladder will you be able to pay for the diseases you're going to get. So then they fish the money back from you once you get sick. It promotes oppression. Speciesism is built into the system, into the game. Because if you cannot objectify animals, you cannot objectify anything else, right? So you have to objectify something in order to make money off of it. It promotes colonialism, racism, and patriarchy. It's built into the game. In fact, when we eat animal foods, we are supporting all of this. You know, the Amazon is burning in Brazil just to make more animal foods. There were people living there in the forest, and we had to kick them out. So when you kick someone out of their home saying that your culture is inferior to my culture, and so my culture needs more meat and dairy, so please get out, that is colonialism 101. If you look at who is working in the slaughterhouses, you'll see racism 101. And if you see what we do to animals, that is an abuse of the feminine. That's patriarchy 101. It's all built into the system, in the game. But the game is designed to self-destruct. Just like the Space Shuttle Challenger self-destructed. Because the game is based on marketing and lies. And civilization is an engineering project. And any engineering project that's based on marketing and lies will blow up in our faces. Exactly as the civilization is doing now. So Richard Feynman said that, for a successful technology, reality must take precedence over marketing or public relations, because nature cannot be fooled. So which means that the Vegan World 2026 calls for the greatest transformation in human history, ever. Everything you see in red on the left-hand side is the game we are playing now. If we continue with this game, we are going to go extinct. And if we transform our game, we could thrive. In the current game, it's a game of normalized violence, a system of normalized violence. And so we are transforming to a system of normalized nonviolence. From a predator species, we're going to become a caretaker species. And I think we deserve a new name for that. Because right now we call ourselves Homo sapiens, and sapiens means wise. And I have never met a single wise person who calls himself wise or calls herself wise. So when you call yourself wise, you're automatically stupid. So we need to change our name. And I think going from Homo sapiens to Homo ahimsa, which is a combination of Latin and Sanskrit, it sort of shows our unity as a species as we come together to become a caretaker species. So I've listed 7 main shifts that need to happen, 7 core shifts, from speciesism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, to veganism and radical equality, from diseases and divisions for humanity to health and unity for humanity, from destruction and pollution of the planet to remediation and regeneration of the planet, from death and cruelty to animals to love and kindness for animals, and from a culture of consumption to a culture of compassion, from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance, and from a money-driven economy to a service-driven economy. And the game of Libra to the game of Aquarius. So let me just show you one example game that we could build in which we automatically do everything on the right-hand side. So I call this the game of Aquarius. In this game, it's an app, and you open the app, and you will see money pouring into your account. Okay? It's pouring into your account. It's constantly flowing into your account. And it flows into the heart of your account. And from the heart, there is a flow into the pocket of your account. But that flow initially is, by default it's about 1/6 of the input flow, and that is your minimum basic income that you automatically get. And if you want to increase that flow, you have to go do acts of compassion. You have to do everything on the right-hand side of that list. You could be doing some act of kindness to animals, or you could be healing someone, or you could be going and planting trees, and the flow increases. There is also a flow from the heart into the community chest. So the community chest is like the same app for an organization, in which money is coming from different individuals, and it also comes into the heart of the community, and from there a flow goes into the pocket of the community, and a flow goes into the larger community chest. So it's a very hierarchical system in which the money is starting from every individual and goes up the ladder, okay, automatically. Now each of these tokens that you get is a measure of the ecological footprint, or your ecological footprint on the planet. So it's a measure, it's an accounting that we are doing of our ecological footprint as a species. And so what we are asking people to do is, when we start playing the game, is to play the game seriously. Start measuring your footprint for all the products you buy. So when you scan a barcode, it will tell you how much footprint you needed to make that product, and it will be subtracted from your pocket. And if you don't have enough in your pocket, it will tell you, perhaps you should go and volunteer here, and that will increase your flow. Okay? So we start playing the game. As we play the game, so the way you earn money in this game is by doing service to others, to service to other human beings, or serving the earth, or serving animals, or you can create things, and you'll increase the flow into your pocket. This has to be done in an open source economy and ecology. Everything has to be open source here. There cannot be any private ownership of things. We are all doing things for the good of all. Okay? This game aligns with our true nature, because as you said, no one wants to hurt innocent animals unnecessarily. So we are compassionate at our core. So this aligns with that. It raises our consciousness, because in the old game is you start with a mindset of scarcity. It's a fear-based system in which you are worried about whether you're going to get enough money every day for your livelihood. So it's a ego-driven game of separation that we were playing. And this game elevates us, because it's all about all of us contributing something for the good of the whole. And we can transition to this new game while playing the old game. So you could still have your dollars and still, and work with Aquarius as a way of measuring your ecological footprint. And over time, this will become the only game in town as more and more people start playing it. In fact, it's an out-and-out Ponzi scheme, because we're going to collect $101 from everyone playing the game, one-time fee, and we're going to use that to give to vegan sanctuaries around the world so that they grow, so we can grow the vegan movement. So as more and more people play the game, vegan sanctuaries are going to get more and more money to grow the movement. So here is a comparison of Libra versus Aquarius, and you can see how, in Libra we are automatically creating class warfare, the way we create money, whereas here we automatically create radical equality in the new game. And everything that we said on the right-hand side is happening in the new game, and it should be based on science and the truth, because we have to measure our ecological footprint, and we have a good way of making sure that we can close the loop, because we have satellites that can tell us exactly what our footprint is, and we can measure what we are doing with Aquarius and make sure that this matches what the satellite is saying. And instead of being funded by corporations at $10 million each, I think it should be funded by individuals at exactly $101 each. So this way, every individual has a right to ask for equality in the new game. But we must play this game voluntarily. We must choose to transform. It cannot be forced on people. See, in the Bhagavad Gita, after giving all this advice to Arjuna, he he represents man in the story. He actually represents courage in man in the story. In the 18th chapter, the last chapter, God tells him, I love you so much that I set you free even from me, and you're free to choose whether you want to wish under the tree or not. So we are free to choose whether we want to play this game or not. But I hope you choose to play the game. We must choose to transform to a caretaker species. And only then will we get to a vegan world by 2026. So we have a documentary about what happened last year in the Vegan World 2026 project. It's called Countdown to Year Zero. It's on Amazon Prime. It's also on Jane's website over there, janeunchained.com/countdown to year zero. It's about 53 minutes. It sort of details what we did last year and how we started this project off. So there's more information on our website, but my books are available on my website as well, under books, so you can read it online for free, or you can buy it from Amazon if you like a paper copy. So thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you for coming. Mahalo, and have a safe return home tonight. Good night, everyone.